When you're good at something, chances are it will be the only thing you'll ever know. Your whole life will revolve around the fact that you're the best at it and that no one can ever tell you otherwise. But what happens when it leads you to something dangerous? Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. In this story we're about to tell, we find that Johnny is the best at hunting, and it's the only thing he does to relieve stress and put food on the table. He'd grown up to his father being really good at hunting, and so, naturally, he would inherit the sport. But one day, it all changes. Deep in the woods, Johnny had been camping out for about 2 days when he finally caught up with a good-sized deer. He'd been chasing and stalking the deer, but he barely noticed that it brought him deeper into the thickness of the woods which he had never explored before. It had already been 2 days, and this was going to be the best catch yet. The deer finally came to a halt. Johnny now had the perfect shot, and the deer was busy munching on some moss. This was his chance. It was now or never. And just as he was about to pull the trigger, a loud scream echoed throughout the forest. He had pulled the trigger, and the deer ran off as fast as it could. Johnny tried to run after it and saw that it had entered what seemed like a huge hole right through the trees. He found it so strange that the hairs up his neck stood as he approached it. In all of Johnny's life, he had never heard of this hole in the woods. Plus, he was so used to hunting that he basically called this forest his own turf. Even his father and grandfather before him never mentioned this, so his curiosity was playing at him. He walked closer to the hole to inspect it. He checked all the branches and leaves. Nothing was out of place to tell him that it was man-made. As he was bent down to inspect the soil on the ground, he was jolted back to awareness when he heard another sinister scream from far away. He thought he was the only person in the woods. He had not seen any other person at the trail he was on. Even though he was on the verge of running away, he was curious to see what it was. Johnny was beginning to doubt whether or not he made the right choice in following the deer and trying to investigate where the screams came from. Seeing as how the bushes seemed to be very thick and the path almost disappearing due to the thickened grass, it seems as if nobody had ever been there in the last few years. As he walked further down the path, he noticed that trees were beginning to diminish, and the next thing he knew, he was already at a clearing. Beyond the clearing, there was something so out of place that he had not expected to find. Just a few feet away from where he was standing was an old, worn-down mansion. Just by looking at it from the outside, sent shivers down his spine. A mansion in the middle of the woods is not common. In Johnny's mind, who would want to build a house somewhere so remote that the homeowners might even get lost if they miss a turn? So, Johnny tried calling out to whoever might still be inside of the house, but he heard no answer. Johnny opened the door and called out to whoever was inside the house, but nobody answered. Everything in the first floor was empty, so Johnny then decided to go up the second floor. His curiosity got the best of him, and it was too late for him to turn back now. So one step led to another, and to the end of the hallway, he saw a light. He slowly walked towards the room and crept up to slowly open the door. Johnny opened the door, and lo and behold, the sight of the room made his jaw drop. This was the least he had expected. This was a very huge contrast to what he saw downstairs. Inside the office, there were no windows, but that didn't shock him. What startled him was that there were lit candles and papers on the desk. Then the thought dawned on him. He wasn't alone inside the house. He approached the desk, and there he found newspapers. But something caught his eye. As he looked closer at the newspaper, he gasped. On the front page was a photo of the mansion he was in, but what shocked him more was the date that was written on the newspaper. The date that was on the newspaper was from 30 years ago. Although with the time that has passed and the house being abandoned, the quality of the paper was still in mint condition. He started to read the article and discovered that the house had been built in the 1950s, but the further he read, the more he discovered the house's dark history. The paper had described the house as an extravagant abode, but then it was the complete opposite of its master. Apparently, it had been built around the 50s by a millionaire who was rumored to be crazy and wanted to get away from the people in his town. But then a decade later, the truth was revealed. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to G's inspired by real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story. The man had actually built the house tucked in the middle of the forest, not to get away from people, but more so to give in to his evil desires, away from prying eyes of the public. He didn't want to be found out, so this was the only way for him to hide his sinister activities. It was only because of a lone teenager back then that revealed the whole truth to the town, and the evil man had eventually gone to jail. The town had wanted to auction off the house, but since it was the House of Horrors, nobody wanted to buy it no matter how lovely it looked. He then noticed a sudden creaking in the floorboards in the attic. All of a sudden, he could see that there was a ladder leading to it. Johnny left the desk and was now walking towards the ladder. He called out again, but nobody answered, so he climbed up and saw that there was somebody by the attic balcony. He walked a little closer, but this time he was careful not to scare the person. Johnny then asked who he was. It was a man in his late 50s, and when he spoke of his name, it rang a bell. Matthew. Johnny knew who this was. This was the teenager that had revealed the original owner's dark secrets to the public. But the air was different, and Matthew had the look in his eyes that Johnny knew all too well. They were not the eyes of a normal, sane man. Matthew had been alone in this house for heaven knows how long, and he wasn't about to let Johnny go just like that. Johnny slowly backed up and assured Matthew that he did not mean to intrude and that he was about to leave. It was like a scene from a horror movie. Johnny was almost caught in a rope trap as he slowly walked back to where the ladder was. He needed to think fast enough, and his brain told him to run and jump down the balcony. So that was what he did. He ran as fast as his feet could take him and flew down the roof and onto the ground. While running, he kept looking back to make sure that Matthew didn't run after him.